Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, the show that is part of the Simply Luxurious Life online destination, cultivating the art of living well, a life of quality over quantity. Visit the blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, at our simplified URL, tsll.co, or thesimplyluxuriouslife.com. There you'll find the show notes for each podcast episode, as well as much more weekly content to elevate your everyday and deepen your contentment. From a Monday motivational post, recipes, videos of the cooking show series, style and decor inspiration, French and British inspired content, and readers' favorite regular weekly post, This and That, which is posted each Friday morning. Now to today's episode. Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. And whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a cafe au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 314th episode of The Simple Sophisticate. Today, we are going to talk about diving deep and living a more fulfilling life, staying away from the surface living approach that we may have unconsciously made a pattern of in our lives. And then I'm going to get to a petit plaisir that is absolute luxury, so simple, and just 15 minutes of your time to add something that might not only feel good, but also help you look your best. Find out what I'm talking about at the end of today's episode. But back to the primary topic of our conversation today. First of all, I want to just acknowledge that I'm a little stuffed up in the head today. And I also, because I realized I've been getting feedback about the podcast, about my nasal voice. I've always had my voice. I don't know what else to do with it. But I am attempting to use Breathe Right strips. Now, today it's not going to help at all because I am congested because of my cold. But I'm going to try to do that moving forward. So patience with me on that. It's a new, just imagine me, for example, sitting here with a Breathe Right strip on my nose. It feels really good, actually, by the way. So hopefully it'll sound even better as we move forward with our episodes. But what are we talking about? Well, I read a book recently that came out in August, and it's called A Minute to Think, Reclaim Creativity, Conquer Busyness, and Do Your Best Work by Juliet Funt, F-U-N-T. And I appreciated the concept of it because it's this idea of slowing down, acknowledging what we're doing isn't working for our overall well-being of living a good life when it comes to work and our personal and private lives. And I wanted to just give you a taste of what this book shares. So I've titled today's episode, Dive Deep into Life Instead of Paddling on the Surface. Let's begin with a quote from the book. The missing element of oxygen, when brought home, gives us time in which we can record the tiny, visceral, magnificent details of living. The shower after a sweaty workout, a belly laugh with a friend, the warmth of fine whiskey, rain on the roof, or a tight and lasting hug. Busy can make you miss it all. Busy keeps you paddling along the surface of the water instead of diving down to see the parrotfish and the fan coral. I appreciated this analogy of daring to dive deep, refusing to just stay on the surface, and basically just keep yourself afloat is how I envision it. Now you may be thinking, well, you don't want to dive deep because then you drown. No, think of it differently. You're preparing yourself to explore, to have confidence in your skills, that what you're doing, you're grounded in your truth, you're grounded in your self-respect of your boundaries and self-love, self-compassion, so that you can go below the surface, go beyond the facade, go beyond the curb appeal, as she talks about in this book, and really get all the feels and really be human. So she talks a lot about thinking and allowing ourselves to think. A thinking life is a happy life. And that's something that we have talked about on the blog before. And I'll link to the post where I talk about that in detail. But if you don't give yourself regular time to think well, living well is near impossible. Inspired by my own aha moments, most recently at work, when everything shifted to at home and we had more time to kind of, not completely do what we wanted to do, but we were able to give ourselves space to work in the manner that was beneficial to us. Our administrator was actually very kind in that regard, saying, take care of your health first and then do what you need to do in your classroom. Of course, that has shifted and changed. That was going to be temporary, and we knew that. But I've also witnessed this throughout my life, when I would notice my productivity rise and then I would notice when it would fall based on the rigidity of the schedule. I witnessed which approach blatantly not only produced the best productivity, but the most joy as well. They were not mutually exclusive. In fact, each time I have had the opportunity to travel to France, I witnessed the daily routines of the French, the long lunches, the deliciously untempered dinners that stretch into nearly early morning, and I remind myself to value quality engagement over the quantity of doing more and fitting more into a day's work or even play schedule. Juliet Funt's new book, A Minute to Think, provides encouraging evidence, predominantly from inside the corporate world, of the benefit of shifting away from more and instead investing in less. What? How does that work? Well, I'm going to share a few examples from the book, but she obviously will share much more when you read the whole book. But today I'd like to share with you 7 ideas to ponder when it comes to how to live a life that includes work, but is not driven solely or by work, but rather is focusing on living a fulfilling life that brings you deeper contentment, joy, and satisfaction. So let's get into the list. Number 1, add regular white space to your days. Quote, without space, we cannot sustain ourselves. The analogy of how fire remains alight demonstrates the point of the importance for white space, or as she defines it, as small, regular pauses throughout our days. Once we have ignited the fire, struck the match, and set ablaze the fuel, Funt reminds, quote, it's the space between the combustibles that fire can't live without. The space is what makes flames ignite and stay burning, end quote. In other words, we need to add more oxygen to our days in order to live and experience life more deeply. So we need to add more white space. We need to add more pauses and not fill it up with something we have to do. When we add white space, we add the potentiality of serendipitous moments, connection, deep, honest, unrushed connections with our fellow human beings, and we add time to think clearly, enabling ourselves to be grounded. So right out of the gate, when she starts writing this book, she shares in chapter 1, add regular white spaces to your days. And she brings in a handful of anecdotes of people that started to do that and the benefits they saw in their work life and their personal life. Number 2, the feeling of life balance comes from the vibrancy of your everyday life. Funt makes the argument that often work becomes our source for the dopamine hit we instinctively crave. And since our homes are places where we live with our family or come home after work to relax and rejuvenate, to sleep, to eat, are perceived as places of routine, clean the dishes, clean the house, go to sleep, wake up, shower, those kind of things. We look outside of our private and personal lives for a rush, even if it results in burnout. The shift that must happen is understanding that we actually need to feel vibrancy, and that vibrancy has to not only be at work. How do you do that? She argues you do that by adding white space not only to your work days, but to your personal and private life as well. White space opens up an opportunity where nothing is planned. Spontaneity, rest, connect can occur without expectation. And I work on that too. There are days where I'm really good at this. And for example, usually it's my Saturdays, but I'm trying to make this happen when it's not my work day more regularly, because I find that I'm actually more, not just productive, but I feel better at the end of those days because I let myself follow what I need. And I don't let society tell me, oh, you're being lazy, you're laying on the sofa taking a nap. Well, after I take that 20-minute, 30-minute, maybe even an hour nap after a long week, I wake up more rested. I actually might go wander in the garden. I might go wander I actually sometimes can be more creatively productive after I've taken that nap instead of forcing myself to stay awake. So number 2 is the feeling of life balance comes from the vibrancy of your everyday life. So give your life room to breathe. Give it oxygen. Number 3, shift your idea of what work looks and feels like. Funt presents the idea of creating, quote, thoughtful, end quote, workdays. Workdays that enable you to flow with what your body and mind needs as you create a protected environment that welcomes the space to think. Quote, in this protected environment, there is room to think. You contemplate tasks before acting. You mull over problems without prying eyes. You take breaks as your body requests them. The feeling of flow is incredible. A mere 2 hours later, you stand up to stretch and realize you've completed what would have taken days during the typical work week. No wonder you burned so brightly. You had plenty of oxygen, end quote. When you add regular white space to your days, you are adding time to think. You are not telling yourself what to think about, but rather simply providing space to let your mind wander and see how you actually feel, what creative solutions arise, how to care for yourself as you give yourself the space to listen to your inner voice. We've talked about this a bit in previous episodes when we talked about the idea of rest, intentional rest. And it's not this idea of taking a nap, although that can be part of your rest. Everyone's different. But the idea that letting yourself play without expectation or certain parameters and just do whatever it is that you want to do, that's not prescribed. And that episode was episode 139, an everyday necessity, deliberate rest. So number 3 is shift your idea of what work looks and feels like. Number 4, unfilled time is not the enemy. Quote, when people are freed from the antiquated notion that unfilled time is the enemy, they discover that taking a minute to think is a formidable source of professional power. End quote. The permission to take regular, everyday pauses, both long and short, must first come from you. You must shift your nurtured value system that always being busy is the best way to live. It isn't. In actuality, nonstop busy only keeps you on the top of the water, and you want to live deeply. You want all the feels, the deep connection, the truths and understandings of who you are so that you can live sincerely. In order to live well, you have to let go of what is keeping you on the surface. Funt encourages readers to give yourself permission to pause. Quote, it makes everything you do better, end quote. Now, I've put that particular quote with regards to giving yourself permission to enjoy and to welcome into your life regular pauses. I've put that into a pic, so you can go to the show notes and just share that quote. Because for me, this was the hard burden to take off my shoulders for a long time. If I'm sitting still at my house on the weekend, no, I have got to be doing something. It took me a while to shift from that to the schedule I now enjoy living. And as I've shared, and I'll share again in this episode, I'm actually far more productive when I have regular white space, as she calls it, or rest, or time to just be, than if I fill my days. And I have a full, well-rounded life. I have healthier connections. I have a life. I don't just work to live. That's the key. Unfilled time is not the enemy. That's number 4. Now I would like to introduce you to the sponsors for today's episode. I'll be back with you in 3 minutes. Whether you're back in the office or still in your loungewear working from home, life's day-to-day responsibilities may be lacking or feeling they're lacking something, such as travel. Fun Jet Vacations is a one-stop shop for all your vacation needs, and as experts in the industry, Fun Jet Vacations offers customers a fast, easy, and fun way to book their next vacation with exclusive package deals to all-inclusive resorts in Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. For a limited time, the listeners of the Simple Sophisticate podcast can use promo code FUNJET75 for $75 off your next Fun Jet vacation at Ryu Hotels and Resorts. Whether you're looking for a family-friendly resort or an adults-only getaway, there's a Ryu Hotel and Resort for you. To get started, just go to funjet.com or contact your travel advisor and you'll be out of the office in no time. Offer is only valid at funjet.com when booked by October 15th for travel through December 2021. Restrictions apply. The Simple Sophisticate is also sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness? Is there something preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist, connect in a safe and private online environment that's also convenient. This is not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online, and you can start communicating in under 48 hours. With licensed professional counselors who are specialized in depression, stress, LGBTQ matters, family conflicts, self-esteem, trauma, sleep, you're sure to find what you need. Everything you share is confidential, and it's time for you to start living a happier life today. As a listener of the Simple Sophisticate podcast, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting the sponsor of our show today, betterhelp.com/simple. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp, HELP.com/simple. Did you know that Woodstock Chimes were the first wind chimes tuned to specific notes, changing the industry forever from looks pretty and makes noise to looks pretty and sounds amazing? Founder and owner Gary Kivstad is a Grammy Award-winning professional musician and has created a company known for finely tuning musical instruments played by the wind. These chimes have been called musical works of art and are the world's favorite wind chime. Over 40 years in business, they have sold their chimes in all 50 states and around the world. Woodstock Chimes offers chimes tuned to various melodies and music scales, and each one is different and delightful. They also have decorative chimes, wind bells, gongs, fountains, and sun catchers to help you create tranquil spaces in your home or garden, and a line of personalized hit chimes that are laser engraved with your own message prior to shipping. All of them make great gifts. You can listen to sound samples on the website, and you'll even find wonderfully large, deep-toned chimes that really make a statement in your entryway or gazebo. As a Simple Sophisticate listener, you have the opportunity to get 15% off by going to chimes.com and using the promo code SIMPLE. Go to chimes.com, the world's favorite wind chime, and use the code SIMPLE to get 15% off. Welcome back. We have 3 more ideas to consider when it comes to diving deep into life instead of paddling on the surface. We've talked about a handful of different ideas, but predominantly the main theme running through all of them is this idea of welcoming white space or everyday pauses into your work and personal life. Number 5 is going to talk about an idea that you all know very well if you've been a listener of this podcast and a reader of the blog. Number 5 is want less, live more. Quote, less liberates. Less gives us the possibility of the pause. Less makes work smarter and more productive. end quote. Wanting less, whether in regards to consumerism or pertaining to working fewer hours a week, each paradoxically contribute to a more fulfilling and sustainable life because, as Funt points out, quote, the path of more is not sustainable, end quote. And she then goes on to say, quote, our Range Rover lives become monsters we must constantly feed, end quote. That quote caught my attention, actually. In other words, the curb appeal of how our lives should look is all eye candy and lacks substance. And environmentally speaking, leads us down the road of destruction to our planet. But along the way, the quality of our lives and relationships also deteriorate, including 2 different recent studies in the book, one done in Japan with Microsoft workers and another that was done in Iceland with a variety of workers across the country in 2021. The results were shared. Both of these studies examined the effects of shifting away from the typical 5-day work week to a 4-day work week, and actually fewer hours as well. The increased productivity astounded researchers. In the first study in Japan, productivity soared 40%, while overhead costs decreased by nearly a quarter. And in Iceland, it was reported that, quote, workers felt less stressed and less at a risk of burnout, and said their health and work-life balance had improved. They also reported having more time to spend with their families, do hobbies, and complete household chores, end quote. The latter study, the one done in Iceland, took place over the course of 4 years, 2015 to 2019. And it's started a conversation. I remember when this research came out, it came out this summer, late spring, early summer. And it started a conversation in a lot of companies, especially as people started to shift away from, or shift back from having worked at home. And this idea of, do we really have to go back to the office 5 days a week? Or can we make something that works well for the workers to improve this work-life balance, this well-being concept? So different companies are approaching this in different ways, but this idea of less is actually more in the work life, but it's also something that contributes to a better overall life with regards to liberating us to then feel more deeply, experience things more deeply, and connect on a deeper level with other human beings. We're not robots. That's number 5. 6, be honest. You may have conformed and didn't realize it. Quote, it is through a subtle psychological conversion that smart people become habituated to illogical things and then tolerate them. End quote. Making the argument that conformity plays a powerful role in our lack of white space, no matter how smart we may be, Funt shares multiple examples on how we fall prey to unhelpful patterns in our daily life when it comes to work. For example, the constant checking of our email, the belief that it is the hours we work, not the quality of work we produce that matters, the belief that working until 2 a.m. is something to brag about, designing a schedule that doesn't even allow enough time for a restroom break. Ultimately, the hidden cost of constant busyness is burnout, not only at work, but in our personal lives. Quote, the human costs are very real in people's wellness, happiness, and work-life balance, end quote. Number 7, don't forget the mortar. One thing I really enjoy about this book is her analogies. She has all sorts of analogies and comparisons to make it make sense to why it won't function and why we think it will. But if you look at it in the regards of the analogy, it's impossible to actually work long term. So this one has to do with the brick and mortar of building a building. Quote, behavioral changes are what we call the mortar, and without them, the whole house is unstable in a brick and mortar building. Quote, behavioral changes at work consist of changing the culture, and most often it must be modeled and regularly practiced by those in top seats, those decision-making seats, the boss, the administrator, the supervisor, whatever that position is at your place of work, whoever's making the decisions of hiring and firing, that's where it has to happen. After all, when the boss is seen working until well beyond the work hours, subordinates indirectly understand this is what is valued. When the boss honors their personal commitments while demonstrating professionalism and attention to work while present, This also sets a precedent for what is not only acceptable, but expected, a healthy work-life balance. And not just for someone who has the same lifestyle as the boss. And I think this is also very important. What I noticed in my own 20 years of teaching is that there was sometimes a contradiction in various schools that I would teach in. So, for example, certain family and lifestyle choices were supported more openly than others. So, as you all know, I have dogs. My dogs are my children, and I live on my own, all by choice. But if you had children, for example, if you had to leave early to pick up your child, if it was understood at some schools that people would cover for you and there was no harm done to your career. In fact, you probably were more praised for it. However, for those of us who, while we didn't have children, whether by choice or the time in our lives had not arrived for us to have them yet, we still have responsibilities, whether it was taking care of our pets, taking them to the vet, caring for a family member, taking care of ourselves, asking for understanding when coverage was needed wasn't always understood by those in the admin office. Now, I say this not with all the schools I worked at, but with some. And I know I wasn't alone. So my point is, the mortar is how we engage, how we live and honor the truth that we are humans, not machines. Yes, trust must be established and maintained and not abused, but so too should be acknowledged that work and life coincide. Don't forget the mortar if you want to prevent burnout, not only for yourself, but from those you work with or who work for you, even if their lifestyle is different than your own and you don't understand it. Acknowledging that we are human is vital. Quality over quantity. As someone who works as an observer, assisting Fortune 500 companies find potential by unburdening their talent from busy work, Juliet Funt witnessed time and time again the underlying truth that is hard to accept in a predominantly capitalistic-driven culture. Quote, professional achievement is not a substitute for happiness, personal connection, and meaning, end quote. Urging readers and the companies who hire her to hone the skill of, quote, getting good at joy, end quote. She embraces much of what living simply luxuriously is all about, pausing to allow true pleasure to be experienced. She warns that we spend so much time seeking that we aren't savoring, and thus we miss the ride of life that will not go on forever, waiting for us to figure out this truth. Don't miss out on this awesome ride. We all have the opportunity to take it, but don't miss out on it. Hold yourself in the present, courageously add more and regular white space to your workday and life, and dive deep into a life you love living. I have included a link to Juliet Funt's book, A Minute to Think, Reclaim Creativity, Conquer Busyness, and Do Your Best Work on today's show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 314, or go to tsll.co/podcast 314, and you'll find everything we talked about today, as well as a couple of additional links to podcast episodes and blog posts that are similar in topic. But now we have a petit plaisir to get to, and it is a luxurious 15 minutes of pleasure and awesome results. I'll be right back to talk to you about that. Welcome back. This week's petit plaisir is a skincare item that I have used and recommend. And I've been talking a lot, I guess not a lot, but regularly in the last 3 or 4 months about skincare items that I'm adding or tweaking with regards to my skincare routine. And I've shared a handful of those on the Saturday Ponderings that top tier members get to read at the middle of every month. And I'd like to share one here that I haven't shared yet. It's a facial mask, and it's a facial mask by Joanna Vargas, and it's a one-time use mask. But, oh my goodness, is it rejuvenating. So this is something you can enjoy while you're soaking in a bathtub. This is something you can enjoy just by sitting in, putting your head back and just taking a breath. But there are many benefits that occur simultaneously if you do join this with a hot bath or bubble bath. Not only are you nourishing your skin with the mask, but you're soothing your body and you're resting your mind because you're staying still. And when we are doing our facial masks at home, you want something that feels good as much as does good. And I've explored many different masks. I love Eminence, for example. I love their products for masks, but I wanted something that felt really good and provided great results. So I have tried something that came recommended to me, and that was Joanna Vargas's facial masks. I do regularly give myself facials at home every week, sometimes twice, aside from my seasonal facial with my esthetician who goes in and corrects everything and gets me back on track if things go off the rails, as sometimes they do. Anyway, so I decided to explore with these facial masks, and I just bought one of their single masks because it's a pretty big investment to buy 5 or more masks, but their single masks are $15 or $17 each. And I was recommended this brand by someone I trust who has steered me toward other skincare products that I love. And so I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I ordered a $17 mask. That was the Forever Glow anti-aging mask. And there are 3 or 4 different types of masks you can choose from based on what you're looking for. And I heeded the advice of the recommendation to place the mask in the refrigerator prior to using. So I just, as soon as it arrived in the mail, I put it in my refrigerator until I was ready to use it, which was a few days later. Highly recommend this now, and I know why she recommended it. Not only does placing the mask in the fridge provide a dose of cool, juxtaposed with the hot of the bath as you're resting in the bubbles, but it also holds the mask in place without a lot of mess. Because if it's not in the refrigerator, it gets a little bit runny and it can be kind of messy when you first put it on your face. When you refrigerate it, it doesn't. I had no mess whatsoever anywhere. Although if it does get messy, as the box recommends, just put all that extra loveliness on your décolletage and your neck. That's a great idea. So for 15 minutes, the mask has the cutouts for your eyes and mouth, and it actually fit very comfortably. It felt as natural as anything on your face could feel, and it doesn't even feel like you actually have anything on there except for you just feel something very cool. I removed it after 15 minutes. My skin was certainly more hydrated and more plumped, which reduced slightly the appearance of fine lines around my eyes. Now, I live in a very dry climate here, so it might have just been bringing, like a humidifier, bringing a lot of moisture to my skin. Every place will be different with regards to the humidity in the air. But for me, I did notice a slight difference with regards to the wrinkles around my eyes. And while I will only use this mask once a week due to the expense, it is a high quality product and it does provide beneficial results. And I will just be honest about this. It just feels good. It feels really good. It doesn't get dry, so your skin doesn't feel tight or anything. And everyone wants some different results with their masks that they use, understandably, because we have different skincare needs. But with regards to the one I used, the Forever Glow anti-aging mask, it really felt good. Now, there are a handful of brands with similar single-use masks, so be sure to explore what works best for your skin type. Joanna Vargas has spas in both Los Angeles and New York and is committed to using plant-based ingredients, with the driving premise behind each product to be first preventative and then second to be effective so that you can see noticeable results. From my experience, I did see noticeable results even after one use, and so I do look forward to using this weekly, on a regular weekly basis. A full box of 5 masks costs $75. Again, that would be just over a month's worth if you did it weekly. If you did it every other week, or if you gave yourself a monthly facial at home, that could last you almost a half a year. So it depends on what you can invest in and what your needs are for your skin. But I definitely would recommend exploring that if that's something that you're interested in and have been wondering about. And I'll provide a link to the direct website of Joanna Vargas as well as other sources where you can buy her masks. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where on each episode, ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each episode where I'll recommend a book, a film, a show, a recipe, anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. I want to thank you for tuning in today, and you can find the show notes for today's episode at thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 314 or tsll.co/314. And as a podcast listener, if you want to listen to me be a guest, not the host of a show, Tune into Solo, hosted by Peter McGraw. I was on his episode about developing taste, which premiered on October 7th. And for an hour and a half, we talk about how one develops taste. We talk about relationships, decor, lifestyle, so many different things. And it was a fun conversation. So I'll provide a link to that on the show notes if you want to take a listen. Otherwise, just look up that podcast, Solo, hosted by Peter McGraw. Tune in and listen to me on the flip side of the microphone being interviewed. All right, this show will be back with a new episode on the 1st of November. And in November, there are 3 new episodes. Yes, it is holiday season time. It's time when you're traveling and busy. And anyway, I'm going to try to be there for you with some new episodes, more than normal. So 3 new episodes coming at you in November. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, on any Monday where there is not a new episode, there is always a Monday motivational post on the blog. Wishing you a lovely week. Thank you for tuning in. Bonne journée. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, visit the blog The Simply Luxurious Life with the shortened URL tsll.co. For more in-depth exploration of how to cultivate your own unique, simply luxurious life, be sure to pick up my first 2 books. Each are available in hardback, paperback, ebook, and at Audible for audio listening. The first is titled Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, and the second, Living the Simply Luxurious Life. And look for a 3rd book to be released in the spring of 2022. Readers can now join the more intimate Simply Luxurious Life international community by becoming members of the blog, which provides ad-free unlimited reading and access to exclusive content such as each month's A Cup of Moments video chat, tours of my home, Le Papillon, the regular monthly post, What Made Me Smile, and Saturday Ponderings, as well as the opportunity to enter all of the giveaways during French and British weeks. To stay caught up on all things Simply Luxurious, the podcast, blog post, and the cooking show, as well as receive exclusive news and an extra dose of inspiration to jumpstart your new month, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's free monthly newsletter, which arrives on the last day of each month. And there's a weekly newsletter, a favorite of listeners and readers, which is also free and arrives each Friday to keep you caught up on the recent weekly posts on the blog. Enjoy with a hot cup of tea or a cup of morning coffee and stay in the know about all things simply luxurious. Thank you for tuning in today, and look for 2 new episodes of this podcast each month on the 1st and 3rd Monday. To be alerted to new episodes and when they become available, follow on Instagram, the Simple Sophisticate podcast, and only the news about this show will be shared. Until next time, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonne journée.